This is the final part of a 3-part video series where I have been teaching you the 5 questions you must include in your interview answer to make sure that you show up as your best self and really knock it out of the park. The first 2 videos covered the ST and the A sections of the STAR format. In this final video, we're going to be covering what 5 questions you need to answer in the R, or the results section. As a reminder, if you haven't seen the other 2 videos, they're in the playlist, which will be at the end of the video. You can check them out there. But these 5 questions are 5 questions that you absolutely positively want to make sure that you have conveyed information on to the interviewer when you are giving your answer to whatever question you're being asked in an interview, to make sure that when you're done answering, they go, yes, this is a person we want to hire. That's what you're looking for. You want them to feel really good about wanting to hire you and thinking not only can you do the job, but you can do the job there and you can excel at doing the job. The reason I like to use the STAR format is, well, it forces linear storytelling, right? The situation task is your beginning, the action is the middle, result is the end. And in the results section, you really have to land, bring it all home, convey to the interviewer, hey, not only did I make a decision and did I do a thing or as a team, but this was the outcome. And it's important and it matters. And with these 5 questions, you're going to be able to convey that. These aren't the only 5 questions you need to answer, but I do believe, as someone who's spent, 20 plus years hiring at some of the best companies in the world and running teams at some of the best companies in the world, these are the kinds of things that I would look for. And quite frankly, if I was interviewing again, these are the 5 questions I'd at least start with in my list of questions I want to make sure that I answer in the results section of my answer. So question number 1, what was the outcome? It never fails to surprise me as I do the mock interviews, how many people utterly fail to actually answer this question without being asked. If you'd like to sign up for your free interview, you can do so at interview@.com, where not only do we have the ability to sign up for free interviews, you have the ability to use any of our tools and services that will help you do better in your interviews. I come at this with a lot of experience. I've worked at some of the best companies in the world, Microsoft, Amazon, Oracle. I've run startups. I've raised money for startups. I've hired hundreds, probably over 1,000 people in my career. So I know what these people are looking for when they're making hiring decisions, and the tools and services that we have available at interview@.com are there for you. The second question, and again, this is like a hammer on this all the time. If you've seen any of my videos, any of the time where I'm doing the chalk talks, where I go through the mock interviews and I point out what a candidate could have done better, what they should have done more of, it never fails. They just don't include data. What are the metrics, right? So question number 2, what were the performance metrics for this outcome, right? If you can't demonstrate that before you made a decision to act, that you knew whether or not you were going to be successful based on some metric that you're measuring, if you don't have that, you're opening yourself up to a lot of questions about judgment and your ability to make good decisions. So what metric or metrics, but specifically what one number, if it can boil it down to one number, did you have in mind as a performance measure to know whether or not this decision you made was the right one? And I get it. There's sometimes where you're going to make decisions, where you stepped in and gave let's take an ownership question, where you see a team member on a different team or someone who you don't have direct managerial control, where you gave direct pointed feedback to, blah, 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 blah. But really, though, the measure there is, are they performing better? Are they getting more work done? Are they having less incidences or whatever? So it might be a soft and squishy metric, but there's always going to be some way of being able to demonstrate to me, the interviewer, that you knew ahead of time, this is what I was looking at to make sure that the decision I made was the right one. Okay, so related to question 2 is question 3, which is, how did this outcome measure against the estimations that you put in place before you acted, as well as against the timeline that you projected, right? So whenever you're going to, especially for bigger projects or things where you're building things or you have to act or get sales or whatever, but you're going to make decisions that have hopefully a timeline attached to them, and 2, measures that you kind of say, well, I think we could have improved this by 20%, just making up a number, right? So when you actually get to market with whatever you're doing, or you make your decision, you released, whatever it is you've done, you've acted, you've done your thing, and now you're looking at the results. How did that measure up against your estimations? It's okay if they didn't measure up. It's okay if you fell short. It's okay if you overexceeded. All of those are okay as long as you can talk to them. But did you at least put a stake in the ground and say, this is our target? That's important, because otherwise you're just kind of shooting from the hip and saying, all right, well, we're just going to go do this thing. We have no idea if we're going to be successful or what a good number looks like. And that's not painting a great picture for companies looking to hire talented employees who have repeatable processes for how they are successful. If you don't do these things, or at least talk about them, you're not demonstrating that you're that person. Okay, question number 4. What frameworks or guardrails did you put in place to ensure that you were monitoring these results over time? Because sometimes it doesn't come down to a single number that you measure once and you're kind of like, it worked, and it's a binary situation. Sometimes it's, well, we changed a user sign-up form, just as an example. I'm a tech guy, changed a user sign-up form, and we were hoping that user signups would improve by 10%. And in the first week, they did. But it turns out that as we monitored that over time, it degraded back down to where we were before. So we had some pop, we saw degradation. So we were at least monitoring over time. We saw it didn't work, so we had to regroup. That's a great story because it shows you had a target, you had a metric that you're using, you were measuring it over time, and that you were aware enough to talk about it and understand why it wasn't working right. So being able to, again, these questions that I'm putting in this framework is so that when you're delivering your answer, as you work all the way through it, the person on the other side of the camera, if we're doing video interviews, or on the other side of the table if you're in person, is they're getting the answers to the questions they are likely asking themselves. Because if they were sitting in a room with you and you were on the same team and you were working, you're walking them through something you did, they're gonna be asking these questions. And this is one of them. Like, okay, so a thing happened and you measured it, but what guardrails or what frameworks, what processes did you have in place to make sure you were measuring that over time? And finally, the fifth question, and this is one I myself would want to answer. And I get that not everyone will ask this, and many interviewers may not even be thinking this, but this is a really good question that helps highlight what kind of a thinker you are, what kind of a leader you are, and how good you are at understanding what you've done. And obsess is the wrong word, but how much do you think about it, right? How much time have you spent thinking about what you did? And in this case, the question is, what could you have done if you had doubled the resources? It's a really simple, like a devilishly simple question, but a lot of people don't really think about it. And if you haven't thought about it going into the interview and you get caught with that question, you're going to get caught flat-footed. And it's going to, as a leader who's talking to people, it says to me, oh, okay, well, you didn't really think this one through, right? Because what if you could have had a 10x outcome with double the resources? Or you might have had a marginal improvement of near zero, right? It doesn't matter how many people you gave me, or it doesn't matter how much money you would have thrown at this problem, we still would have achieved this result. If you can't demonstrate that you've thought that through, a more junior employee definitely is not going to be thinking about this, but the more senior you are, you definitely need to be able to talk to this, because it demonstrates that you're not just thinking about the problem in the confined space of which you have it, but you're thinking to yourself, okay, what can I do if I double the resources? And the corollary to this is, what would you have done if you had half the resources? What kind of outcome would you have expected, right? Because it just demonstrates that you're thinking about the whole field of play and not just with blinders on this one decision that you're trying to make. So those are the 5 questions you need to think about, but there's a little bit of a nuance here that I really want to land, because if you've watched, again, any of my videos, I hammer on metrics and data all the time. And one of the biggest issues, or the main issues I see with the mock interview candidates, is that sometimes they lack data, and even if they have a high-level metric, they're not able to defend it. They can't tell me why that metric. They can't tell me how they would improve that metric, or what else they could have looked at if they had different data. Because sometimes it's just, look, we didn't have the data, so this is what we had to use as our metric. But taking that step back, what else could you do? How would you augment the data that you have to make better decisions? And if you're not able to talk through that, it really is conveying a lack of think big, it's conveying a lack of ownership, and it's conveying a lack of dive deep when it comes to, do you understand the problem space and how would you have done things differently if you had more, and are you thinking about this in the right way? Because from a resourcing standpoint, if you had more, could you do more? What does that look like? Can you defend it? Can you sell it? These are all things that I would want to see as a hiring manager, as an executive at any of these companies that I've worked, or running the companies that I run now. These are the things that I look for, because I want to know that you're a person that can be trusted to make hard decisions, but you've thought through all of the challenging questions and can convey that to me. Okay, that brings us to the end of this 3-part series where we've covered the situation, task, the action, the result, the 5 questions for each of those that you should probably answer when delivering your answer in an interview. And you know what I'm going to try and do next week? I'm going to try and do a bring it all together video where I cover out those 15 questions using a line item from my resume. I'm going to go dig that out of a closet and pull up some story and do here's what it looks like in practice. So you can see how it all comes together in an answer from someone, frankly, who is a chief product officer, CEO, COO type level person, how I would do that for an interview if I was interviewing for a new role.